As like for many Muslims and people of faith, Dr. Kaskas felt Islam and the teachings of the Quran were being misrepresented, and the Quran needed to be better understood around the world. And so he began his work to find common ground between the three Abrahamic faiths and to build a foundation from which tolerance, acceptance, and peace can grow. So this is what I learned, and I was clearly thinking, wow, that's really interesting, and I think I'd really like to be part of that conversation. And so I dug a little bit more and found out a little bit more about Dr. Kaskas. And in January 2015, I learned Dr. Kaskas translated and published the Quran into easy to understand English. And I learned that it's easy to understand was very important in that sort of building of bridges. A year later, in January 2016, he published the Quran with references to the Bible, with no less than 3,000 references to the Old and New Testament, to be precise. Dr. Safi Kaskas, as many of you will know, is an administrator in the managerial sciences with over 40 years of broad-based experience in strategic planning, leadership, and business ethics, with an emphasis on strategic management in corporate and academic worlds. He has studied Abrahamic religions and lectured throughout the US and the Middle East on subjects relating to Islam, interfaith, and reconciliation between evangelicals and American Muslims. He's also a senior researcher in Islam and multi-faith reconciliation with George Mason University for World Religions, Diplomacy, and Conflict Resolution. As Paul said, Dr. Kaskas is also the founder and president of the International Quran Research Association, IQRA. And so without going too much more into what Dr. Kaskas has found, learned, and would like to share, can I please welcome Dr. Kaskas to give us his presentation and perspective on the situation. Thank you very much.
Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. I want to start by giving my deepest condolences to the British people and the royal family. Let me now give you some background for what led to this conference. I came to the United States from Lebanon in 1969. And I lived all this time in the southern part of the United States. The South has been very good to me. If it wasn't for my southern neighbors who welcomed me, opened their homes to me, introduced me to their friends, and helped me start my business, I wouldn't have made it. It was their kindness, southern hospitality, and true neighborly characters that helped me. For 33 years, all was well. I was always welcome. My religion was somewhat intriguing to most, and everyone invited me to speak about it until 9/11 happened. A shocked and grieving America desperately tried to understand why anyone would carry out such an assault. I was more shocked than they were. Why do they hate us? Asked a bewildered-looking president. Later, America found its scapegoat, Arabs, Muslims, and anyone who looked Middle Eastern. Today, when I look back at 9/11, I feel it was a fork in the road for many. For some, it was a landmark for deepening fear of Muslims. The intensified rhetoric had exposed an alarming trend that has developed since 9/11. Muslims were consistently cast as somehow un-American because of their faith. But all this is changing. Not only American Muslims survived all this hatred created by 9/11 and followed by the war on terror that destroyed several Muslim-majority countries, but American Muslims started inviting their neighbors to their mosques, shared their holy book, the Quran, with their neighbors, and are leading the way today toward pluralism and the protection of freedoms guaranteed to all Americans in the Constitution. This is what led to today's conference. Today, I will speak to you about promoting peace through the reconciliation of the Muslim, Christian, and Jewish holy books. But what does the reconciliation of our holy books mean? Would I be trying to fuse all three books into one? Absolutely not. What then? Is it an attempt to prove that one book is right and the other books are wrong? No, not at all. This would not be reconciliation at all. What is it then that I mean by the reconciliation of our holy books? It simply means to invite a fair-minded group of people, just like the people we invited for today, who follow the three books to find the commonalities that exist in them. Once we discover these commonalities, we will then meet again in order to build bridges on the common grounds we discovered and invite the followers of the three religions to cross the bridges and meet and work together to build peace among them, especially when I know that all holy books call on us to live together in peace. Jews, Christian, and Muslim represent the majority of the world population, or 57%, according to Pew Research Center. Yet peace can't happen in the world without the understanding, cooperation, and support of the believers in these holy books. They need to be convinced that their own scriptures teach inclusiveness and support this proposed change from the present exclusivist power paradigm, allowing the strong to dominate and oppress the weak, into a paradigm of peace through pluralism, allowing all of us to prosper together. The key to this proposal is for each one of us to worship God the best way they know how, and to leave that judgment to Him. In addition to the war raging in Europe at this time, there is a wave of national populism taking place throughout the world, where far-right populists are rising in the polls and are gaining unprecedented strength by spreading fear of the other and amplifying religious biases. Misrepresentation arising from ignorance breeds fear, and fear remains the greatest enemy of peace. The solution is to create tools of enlightenment, to educate and dispel ignorance, to get as many religious leaders on board and get them to support each other and the message of reconciliation, to get the parents to educate themselves about other religions if they want their children to grow up accepting the other. While the promise of this conference is to find a path toward peace through the reconciliation of our holy books, I like to propose this tool, which is my book, the Quran, with the references to the Bible. It is a daring book which shows the common ground between the holy books of the Abrahamic faith. It's written in simple English, so it can be understood by most. It is an important new tool for Jews, Christians, and Muslims who want to set aside stereotypes and caricatures of one another to understand the similarities between our great faith traditions, as well as respect the differences that exist, and to find within those beliefs the resources to respect the other and work together for the common good. My co-author, the late Dr. David Hungerford, and I had as our underlying motivation for the book to build bridges of better understanding, undermine extremism on all sides, and enlighten ignorance. This book, this powerful instrument, offers Muslims, Christians, and Jews a fresh insight to reconciliation with God and man, and it is greatly needed in these turbulent times. The book started as a Quran translation project. During the years I spent working with the translation, it became obvious to me that the Quran's purpose was not to compete with the Torah and the Gospels, as it often confirms them as books of guidance and enlightenment. Check Quran 5:46 and 48. As a final revelation, it is a commentary on both, meaning the Quran is a commentary on both the Torah and the Gospels. This point is missed by most Western scholars, but it wasn't missed by my co-author, Dr. Hungerford, who was instrumental in encouraging me and in spending his precious time with me to complete the book. A closer look at the Quran, and one finds it to be inclusive and promoting pluralism. Let's hear what the Quran says about this subject. It says, "Truly those believers in this message, as well as the Jews, the Christians, and the Sabians, whoever believes in God and in the last day and does righteous deeds will have their reward from their Lord and will not have fear, nor will they grieve." Quran chapter 2, verse 62. The Quran here confirms all of previous religions and describes them using a term of endearment, the people of the book. The holy books tells us that their origin is God himself. And therefore, the Quran tells us that the message communicated through them is essentially the same. The speaker in the Quran is God himself. And he is telling his messenger Muhammad and all of us, he has ordained for you the same faith he commanded Noah and what we have revealed to you, meaning Muhammad and later on all of us, and what we commanded Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. You shall uphold the faith and do not break into factions. This is Quran chapter 42, verse 13. The faith the Quran is talking about in Arabic called deen is the Quran is emphasizing that faith. It can be found in the opening of the Shema in the Torah. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." Deuteronomy 6:4. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. According to Jesus, we are all neighbors. Look at Luke 10:25-37. But if it wasn't for a diverse society that included the Samaritans at that time, we would not have heard of the Good Samaritan. We need to learn again that our diversity is a source of our strength. This diversity can be the trajectory for creativity in many fields. We need to learn from the Quran as well as from common sense that diversity, we need to learn from the Quran again that our diversity is a source of strength. This diversity can be the trajectory for creativity in many fields. We need to learn from the Quran as well as from simple logic that if God had wanted, he could have made all of us a single community, but instead he is testing us by means of what he has revealed to us. Here is what the Quran says about this. We have assigned to each of you a law and a way of life. If God had wanted, he could have made all of you a single community. But instead, he is testing you by means of what he has revealed to you. So compete in doing what is good. You will all return to God, and he will clarify these matters about which you have differed. This is Quran 5:48. The Quran is in fact telling us that striving to live peacefully together is an act of worship, and learning to respect our differences is a blessing. It is saying to us to accept the other and to compete with them in doing what is good. It's not saying convert the others, nor it is saying fight the others. It's simply saying compete in serving each other. Those with means should compete to help those with limited resources. If we love for others what we love for ourselves, then we should not oppress, as we don't like to be oppressed. We should regard bad for others whatever we regard as bad for ourselves. The adoption of this simple code of conduct by faith leaders can go a long way in healing the strained relationship between people of various faiths. The Quran goes a step further. Where Jews, Christians, and Muslims are divided and cannot resolve their differences, the Quran in chapter 2, verse 148, prescribes an appropriate arena for competition. We are to compete with each other in good deeds. The Quran says, to every community, there is a direction to turn to. So compete in doing good deeds. This is Quran chapter 2, verse 148. Homogeneity, a term in the Quran describing al-Qura, is a recipe for intellectual sterility and eventually leads to the end of a civilization. Whereas pluralism that encourages healthy, respectful competition and debates among the diverse cultural groups raises the intelligence and virtue of the society in general. It does so because each community can act as a role model for particular skills and human virtues for others to emulate. And that is a reciprocal process. It works both ways. It is through such reciprocal engagement that the core values upheld by one nation, society, or community can be tested and held to account by all of us. Social justice is a wonderful arena for competition, as justice, equality, and human rights are craved by millions of oppressed people all over the world. In conclusion, it is becoming evident that Muslims can best live their faith and strive in a civil state that guarantees equal rights and freedoms to all citizens, such as the first Medina community under Prophet Muhammad, peace be with him. My work with the Quran confirms that freedom and compassionate justice are the essence of the Quran. God endowed each one of us with the ability to choose so we can be individually responsible for our free choices. Hence, the more freedom the state guarantees its citizen, the closer it is to implement God's will for its existence. This book is a first step of a project in progress. We need a team of scholars to find more parallels between the books to bring believers closer. We Muslims need to continuously strive to have a contemporary understanding of the Quran in order for the Quran to fulfill its promise to be enlightenment and mercy for all people all the time. I call on this peace conference to adopt this book, to spread it, to develop it as a tool of reconciliation and bridge building, so people of various faiths can focus less on their doctrinal differences and focus more on their rights and the future of their children, as in Arabic we call it khulafa, vice regents of Allah on this planet. Thank you very much. At the end of this conference, God willing, we will get again together and we'll try to come out with some resolutions. So please be prepared to propose some resolution. Thank you very much, and I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kaskas, for that very interesting and enlightening insight into all of the work that you've done. It's very clear to pick out a few key points from what you shared with us about your work and findings that underscore the values of equality, respect, and inclusivity, and the importance of learning to live in an environment and creating an environment in which we respect each other and aim and strive for freedom and justice for all, irrespective of what we believe or not about the other. I think that is one of the key values I think I can see very clearly in all three of those books, and I can, from my experience, understand that that is the core value that we all share. It really does need to be promoted and understood better. So thank you very much for that, Dr. Kaskas, and we look forward to hearing more and discussing that towards the end of this session and again in a few weeks.